Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, if you make the claim, as the left does out there, the media does out there, that black people cannot be racist, then I guess you would assume that there can be no genocide of white folks either. That seems to be inextricably linked, I suppose, in that crazy way of thinking. I want to talk about this today. I want to talk about the aftermath of President Trump's showdown in the White House, in the Oval Office. Earlier this week, we talked about it, but there have been some things that have happened since that particular point in time. And the media is, listen, it is remarkable to see them do backbends here to try to say that Trump was wrong, and to say what's happening in South Africa is not at least a problem. You can, I suppose, argue about terms, whether genocide is appropriate, whether the crosses that are, that are placed as memorials. You'll see from this first soundbite that I'm going to play, Yamiche Alcindor from NBC News. She is, I think, missing a larger point here because she claims, or perhaps Trump said, these were grave markers. They're memorials of people who died, which in one sense is the same thing while not being at a gravesite. Regardless, I want to talk about this today. I want to play a soundbite. Karoline Leavitt having a showdown with Yamiche Alcindor. And again, just this all-out desire. It's a lot. There's a lot going on here. They want to oppose, they the media, they the Democrat Party. They want to oppose anything that Trump says, but they also want to defend their morally bankrupt worldview, which good luck doing that. It is so just, it's absolutely wicked, the worldview of the radical left, my friend. So I want to talk about that today. There's other things in the stack of stuff as well. Time permitting, we'll get to them. We'll get to some of them, at least in the second hour. We'll see how far we get into this issue today in the first hour. So before we get started, though, my friends, if you are tossing and turning at night, it's time to do something about that. It's time to consider a change, and it's time to consider MyPillow. Their patented pillows are fantastic. They've also got luxurious towels, cozy slippers, a whole lot more. They've also got dog beds, which our dogs, we have 3 dogs now. I don't know if have I shared that? I shared that, yeah. We got a third little yipper. We've got Echo, we've got Tango, and now we have Kilo. And Kilo is a pup and is tiny. The other 2 are, medium-sized dogs. But they all will share, I don't know if Kilo does yet, but the other 2 share this large dog bed from MyPillow. But regardless, my friends, if you are having trouble sleeping or just want more comfort, MyPillow is the place to look here. Let's not forget either of these products are made right here in the good old US of A. And you're not just getting comfort with this product, you're supporting American jobs and American values. That's a win-win, my friends. So go to MyPillow.com, use promo code TODD for big savings on the products they offer there. Do not wait, whether it's for your sleep, your mornings, or just a little bit of extra comfort for you, or dare I say, your 4-legged friend as well. MyPillow has you covered. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. Comfort, my friends, that you can trust and believe in. All right, so let's get to this. We got Karoline Leavitt doing a press conference. She's taking questions, and there's I about used the word journalist. There's a make-believe journalist in the room named Yamiche Alcindor. Now, she used to work for PBS, Public Broadcasting Service. She was, to me, one of the glaring examples of what is wrong with public PBS in the past, but she's also what is wrong. There's many examples, but one of the many examples of what is wrong with journalism today. She is not In fact, let me play. I got a clip here. I'm at redstate.com. Molly Hemingway is on with, this was a couple of years ago, but she was on with, on a program, Media Buzz here, and she's talking about Yamiche Alcindor. And I just want you to hear what she has to say, because it gives a little bit of an insight into the mindset, the behavior, the thinking of the person that you're about to hear question Karoline Leavitt about these grave markers, these memorials, I should say, in South Africa. This was in the video that Trump played while he was sitting down with the South African president earlier this week, where we had that showdown. It was quite the dramatic showdown that Trump had with him. Anyway, I want you to listen to what Molly Hemingway says here to kind of paint the picture of the mindset and just the thinking and the activism of one Yamiche Alcindor.
Yamiche Alcindor is actually not a reporter. I mean, that is what her position is supposed to be. She's a hardcore activist. She's kind of an embarrassment to the journalistic profession because of these questions she asks. Not just there, where she's asking, as an activist, for help for her Democratic Party allies. She did that at the very first press conference on March 25th, when she said that our entire border crisis was a result of Joe Biden being such a wonderful person. This is in such stark contrast to what she did during the previous administration, where she was cartoonishly hostile each and every encounter she had with President Trump. And that's something that people can understand, being adversarial toward a president and then being adversarial toward the next president. But the way that she flips from being such extreme, well, she doesn't really flip at all. She's a Democratic partisan activist and a propagandist, regardless of who's holding the office. But we need answers. We need someone to hold this administration accountable. We do have one-party control in D.C., as Harold notes, and we need some people to push back against what's happening.
Harold, I should note that James Carville, among others, I said, I believe on PBS, that some Democrats need to go to a woke detox center. But, it is true that critical...
Well, that's all the part I want to play from Molly Hemingway, but that's Howard Kurtz's program. So listen, if you're a journalist, your job should be to get information, to report on that information with as little bias as humanly possible. We're all biased to some degree. Sometimes we don't even necessarily catch the bias, but if you're as fair-minded and as focused on telling the story from the perspective of the individual or the group on one side of the issue and do that the same way for the group on the other side, then you're headed in the right direction of being a journalist. We shouldn't know who journalists voted for in elections. We shouldn't know that. We should actually watch a report on the news from a journalist and think, I don't entirely know. Now, the truth is, if they come across as fair-minded today, the chances that they are voting for the deceit coming from the Democrat Party is virtually zero. But we shouldn't know. We shouldn't have any telltales in their actual reporting. But that, my friends, is unfortunately what happens today. Journalists want to be people who who drive people to a specific outcome, to a specific choice or a decision. That is not journalism. Journalism is focused on getting information out to the public as best that they can, as best as the journalists can, to help people understand what is being discussed. If you're talking about politics, what's being discussed, what's being debated, what's in a bill, the arguments being made for and against that bill. That's the job of the journalist. Now, journalists today will actually say that's antiquated, that's old-fashioned, because journalism should be standing up for things like fighting for our democracy, which then gives them cover to jump in and weigh in and put their hands on the scale, hands on the balance, and tipping that balance in favor of whomever they want to tip it in favor of, which of course is the Democrat Party, and then claiming that the other side is fighting against democracy. They're engaging in gross misinformation and propaganda, and so the journalist has to tell us that's the case. But see, that's not at all how that should work. It just isn't the case. There's other ways to say, look, this is what this particular person says. I looked for sources to substantiate that. I could not find any sources, right? There are many ways to do this, but this has become a game. This is a daily pursuit of propaganda by these make-believe journalists. They want people to reach a certain conclusion, a certain decision. Now, that is not journalism. That is not, that's why I'm not a journalist. I've said this before. Some people are too obtuse out there, especially in the social media world, to understand that, because I'm talking about things that are happening in the culture and politics and so forth, in faith. And I am telling you from my perspective why I think you should agree with me on these issues. We talk about them. We think about them. We don't just report on them. We talk about the pros and cons. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I do want you to conclude that this nation is a shining city on a hill. This nation, while far from perfect, because it's filled with individual people, and by the way, none of us are perfect, but the ideas that were set forth in our founding documents, those ideas are worth following, pursuing, defending, passing on to the next generation. In comparison to what we've seen around the world, throughout history, and even today, as we talk here about South Africa, this nation is a unbelievably good example in comparison to what we've seen around the world. I think back to when I was a child in the 1980s, growing up in the Cold War. I remember it was tense. I was a kid. You don't know any better as a kid. But there were things on the news. There were things on the news when we would sit down and watch, have dinner at night, and we would have the TV on sometimes, maybe not other times, but the news would come on. And, we're talking about nuclear holocaust. And I might be an 8-year-old kid, and that's the story of the news. You got Reagan meeting with Gorbachev to talk about something, and if we don't get it solved, it's going to end a nuclear war. I believe, we didn't do this a lot, but I know we did a drill when I was in school where we got under our desks if there was an earthquake, because there was a prediction that there was going to be an earthquake on one particular day. I forget what year this was. We're not far here from the New Madrid Fault. We're not on it, but we're reasonably close to it. You get down to Evansville, you get down to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and that part of the country, Memphis, Tennessee, that area, that is New Madrid Fault, ground zero, so to speak. But we're not too far from that, and a New Madrid Fault, a big earthquake on the New Madrid Fault line, will almost certainly create problems in this part of the country too. And so there were predictions that there was going to be a big earthquake, and we did earthquake drills. We got under the desk. I can't remember if we did anything for a nuclear strike, which is honestly kind of comical in hindsight. Like, what are you going to do about that? But I know that people did do that sort of thing. That was the world that we grew up in. And I think about this now as I'm just thinking about my children. We've not exposed them to that level of, fear, but that was the world back then. And why was it the world back then? Because of the evil empire of the Soviet Union. We were in an arms race. It was truly good versus evil on the international stage. Two superpowers. And I find myself wondering sometimes, why people cannot see clearly that the one who won the Cold War, the United States of America, ushered in a world that would have been, that is infinitely better than what it would have been had the Soviet Union won the Cold War. Can you imagine how dark and bleak and hopeless and tyrannical the world would be if the United States of America lost the Cold War to the Soviet Union? Can you imagine that? And again, I had a class in college where a professor tried to tell us students that the communism was better. Of course, he was telling us in a free society. Of course, he was telling us in a world after the end of the Cold War. I had a good friend, by the way, who had a piece of the Berlin Wall. I mean, these were real things. This was real trauma, real life and death, real tension that existed. And this country was the shining city on a hill. Again, not perfect, but in comparison to what they were on the other side as far as the ideas they were embracing, it's not even a close. It's truly, it was good versus evil. It truly was. The ideology of good versus evil. Anyway, but these folks in the media are siding with the folks on the side that are often embracing evil. And I guess it's one thing if they do that, if they want to vote that way, but it's not journalism if they're telling us what they believe and what they think and so forth. So all that being said, Yamiche Alcindor, she is in the press pool yesterday, and she's going to question Karoline Leavitt for the White House. She's going to basically say Trump is lying about these white crosses in South Africa. For those of you who did not join us earlier this week, I mean, I've got to shame you, first of all. Shame on you. I'm kidding. You can go back and listen to the program. I want to say it was probably Wednesday's episode, I think, where we were talking about President Trump's showdown with President Ramaphosa from South Africa in the Oval Office, where they queued up a video. Trump had a stack of papers that had stories of white farmers who were reportedly killed in South Africa. Trump was pressing the South African president about this, and he showed a video. Looked like something taken from a helicopter, where they were flying low, and there were cars lined up along the highway, and there were white crosses. And Trump made a comment about how those those are there because of white farmers in South Africa being murdered for their land. That's what he was saying. Now, Ms. Alcindor says, well, Trump said that these were graves. These aren't graves. These are, well, she doesn't really want to say what they are, but they're markers. They're memorials. The body is not there. These are just a visual memorial of the people who have been killed. And she thinks that this somehow undermines what Trump was trying to say. And you listen to Karoline Leavitt's response to this. She's not having anything to do with this.
Sure. The president showed a video that he said showed more than 1,000 burial sites of white South Africans that he said were murdered. We know that was not true and that the video wasn't showing that. So I wonder, why did the president choose to show that? What's not true, Yamiche? It's not true that the video was showing a burial site. It is unsubstantiated that that's the case.
No, it is true that video showed the crosses that represent,
which is what the president claimed.
The video showed images of crosses in South Africa about white farmers who have been killed and politically persecuted because of the color of their skin. And those crosses are representing their lives. Those crosses are representing their lives in the fact that they are now dead and their government did nothing about it. Are you disputing that there's no...
I'm disputing the fact that the video showed what the president claimed it showed, because it did not show that. But even more, what I'm asking you is who at the White House...
No, it did show that. It showed white crosses representing people who have perished because of racial persecution.
Verifies the videos that the president shows, and what protocols are in place when there's unsubstantiated information being put out for the world and world leaders to show?
Yamiche, what's unsubstantiated about the video? The video shows crosses that represent the dead bodies of people who were racially persecuted by their government. In fact, the Associated Press, of all places, has a picture of that very monument, and the caption from the Associated Press is, "Each cross marks a white farmer who has been killed in a farm murder." So it is substantiated, not just by that video and the physical evidence that everybody saw on display in the Oval Office, but also by another outlet in this room, the Associated Press. So you should take it up with them if you believe the claim is unsubstantiated, and that's a ridiculous line of questioning. John, go ahead. Go ahead.
And she moves on. So she's saying here, look, the president said this was the burial site. This is not, I haven't gone back to check if that's even what he said. But the point is that it's not whether the bodies lie there or not. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, what is her point? What is she hoping to get from this? The only thing I can imagine that she wants to get from this is to be able to say it's incorrect. It's a false claim because the bodies aren't buried there. Okay, well, maybe President Trump misspoke, as the left often likes to say. Maybe he just used a phrase that was incorrect. But the general point here is true. Those crosses are memorials for people who have been murdered because of their race. That's what this is about. Now, listen to me. It is unbelievable to me. It is unbelievable to me. If there is an instance in this country, or when there is an instance in this country of law enforcement shooting and killing a black suspect, I hate these situations. No matter what the cause, it's terrible, the loss of life. Now, most of these cases, it's pretty quickly evident that the law enforcement officer is completely justified in his or her action because there's something else going on, right? Someone reaches in their pocket, they're fighting police, they're going for the officer's weapon, something like that. All these sorts of things happening. Justifiable. But we're immediately supposed to, as they say their name. And listen, if the officer is acting, if the officer was unjustified, the officer 100%, regardless of race. This is just how works in the media. Race is everywhere. They force it down your throat, and then they dare you. They dare you to speak out against or to defend someone who's the white person, and because they're going to say, well, are you racist? Do you not like the black? No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the facts of the situation. Candidly, many times we don't even know the facts of the situation, and these folks are out there demanding that we stand up for justice. I stand up for justice, but I don't know who deserves what if I don't have the facts and the information of the case. And simply knowing someone's race or gender or ethnicity doesn't tell me anything. So in the case of South Africa, there is evidence, and I'm going to get into this in the latter part of the program as I'm getting to the end of this first segment, but there's evidence to show that there is racially motivated crime and murder against white people in South Africa. That is as bad as if it was flipped. If there was racially motivated murders and crime against black people or whatever group of people, this is wrong no matter what. But the left and the media will refuse. They outright refuse to give in and to substantiate that this might even be remotely close to being the truth. They don't want to come across as, looking like that white people can be a victim of this because they're so driven by this racial mindset. But B, they don't want to stand up and say that President Trump was right. I got to take a break here, my friends. Quick timeout. Continue after the timeout. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You know what? I need to say this today because we're into an area that a lot of people get a little uncomfortable. The advertisers of this program do not necessarily agree with the content of this program. But let me tell you this without the slightest bit of hesitation. They 100% should be 100% on board with what is said here. That being said, my friends, if you are in sales, let me ask you something. Are you where you want to be? Whether you're struggling to close deals, you just want to sharpen your skills, you want to get better at your profession, you want to make more money, take better care of your family, Matt Easton, Easton University are here to help you. They're here to help you by giving you access to their training system and their personalized coaching system. They do a couple of coaching calls each week along with their systematic approach, their sales training. This is as good as anything I've ever seen. In fact, I would say it's the best thing I'm aware of out there in the market today when it comes to sales training. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a salesperson, if you're a sales manager, if you're someone responsible for making sure that your people have the training to effectively bring in business for your company, this is something absolutely worth looking into. We've used it here. I think it's very, very good. I think it can help you as well. And not only that, if you sign up and become a student, Matt's going to jump on a phone call with you, a welcome call, and help identify your areas of struggle so that you can hit the ground running with the sales training and begin to see the rewards, the payoff from your investment as quickly as possible. ToddHuffShow.com/Easton is where you can go for more information or to sign up. ToddHuffShow.com/Easton, EASTON. That's how you spell that. You go there, you get the sales training, and you'll get your one-on-one welcome call with Matt himself. Do not let this opportunity pass you by, my friends. Invest in yourself. If you follow the system, it will pay off. All right, so back to this issue of race. We have gotten to the point. It's amazing. If you ask a lot of people, man on the street interviews, they'll ask you, what's the most racist country on earth? And a lot of people will say America. And you look at our makeup in this country, the race of the people who live here, right? The racial composition of the people who live here. And this is an incredibly racially diverse country. Now, you will certainly find communities and parts of the country that are certainly not as racially diverse, but there's reasons for that. It doesn't always mean that the people who are there the only answer to that isn't that the people who live there are the people who are they're racist. It just means that that's the way that people moved out to land and built communities, and especially more rural communities have a different breakdown based upon the careers of people and farming and all this. Now, there certainly can be racist. There are racist people in every community. But I'm telling you, the people that I know, the people that I deal with on a regular basis, I don't know any of them that I would say is a racist. I don't. And maybe I'm just not looking at it through, I don't know. But I think that there certainly were times in this country when this country was very racially motivated. I think the people who are pushing the racial narrative are the people in this room that are questioning the White House. They're the ones that keep this narrative alive. They're the ones that have convinced half the country that President Trump is a racist. Based upon what? Based upon what? Trump could not care less about that sort of stuff. Based upon what? Friends, this is, we're never going to develop and become stronger as a nation if this is where we stand. If there are clear examples of someone acting racist, then it will be addressed. There's no way it's not going to be addressed in today's world. You're not going to, it doesn't, in certain fringe parts of the society, it might, but in the mainstream society, it doesn't last for a millisecond, nor should it. But for this to be the insatiable, nonstop talking point, or I guess if it's not directly the talking point, but the fuel behind it, because they can politically break people into groups, and that helps them. They pit people then against each other. They get people put into their own little group, and then they say, oh, this group has a problem with this group because one person who was this color and this gender had a problem with this one. So now everybody who matches the color or the gender or the whatever of the person, that's whose team. Why are we on teams that way? It's not how I think. We're all human beings, by the way. All of us are human beings. The differences between us biologically that change the color of our skin are minuscule. The things that we have in common are, regardless of our race and ethnicity, are dramatically more than the things that make us physically different, physically look different. Superficiality is a cancer in this country. It is. And listen, I understand historically there have been some terrible and atrocious things. But it can also be today this insatiable, nonstop, just drip, drip, drip talking about race and trying to create racial tension and to try to keep groups politically attached to this, that, or the other, at odds with one another. Folks, the reality is, you know who we all should be united against right now? Regardless of our color, we should be united against these clowns who have created this problem for us in Washington, D.C. We should be united against the clowns who are lying to us and deceiving us in the media. And I don't give 2 cents about the color of the journalist. I've been after Jake Tapper, who's a white guy. I feel like I'm connected to Jake Tapper 0%. I don't feel like I'm any more connected to Jake Tapper because he's a white guy than I do not feel attached to Yamiche Alcindor because she's a black female. Those things have zero to do with it in my mind. I don't even relate to that. I relate to people as human beings. Now, I would say you can also, there are vastly more differences between men and women than there are between a race of white guys and white guys and black guys or some such thing. There's always differences on an individual level and certainly culturally as well, but these are small differences. At the core, my friends, we all generally want the same thing. Generally, right? We all want to have a level of prosperity where we can be free, where we can have hope in our children's future. We want a loving family, or we want relationships with people. We want to be able to make decisions and pursue our dreams and have a lifestyle that's comfortable to some degree, right? I mean, we may not all be millionaires and billionaires, but we want to be able to live a life that's enjoyable. We want to be able to have hope in our children's future. We want to be able to pursue our dreams. And that at its core is what this nation is. That's why this nation has been such a blessing to the face of this planet, because it spreads some of these things even outside of our borders. And it's outside of our borders that we're talking about here with what's happening in South Africa. So I've got another thing here in the stack of stuff. That I'll get to. Before I do that, as I'm doing that, let me remind you that we have relaunched our promotional company called Red, White, and Brand. This is what I did previously. We sold this thing 6 years ago. Our non-compete expired. We've relaunched, reopened Red, White, and Brand. Your logo on almost anything, folks. We can help from apparel. And listen, this could be pretty sophisticated stuff where you have an online store. This can be customer facing. You could have a place where people can go and, manage just, maybe you're in HR and you need someone who can, or a resource to get new gear for a new team member. They can go on there and order it. I mean, we can do this in any number of ways. If you need something for trade shows, if you need trade show booths, trade show materials, job fairs, promotional products, print materials, that stuff's not as necessary as it once was in today's digital world, but we can help you deliver all of those things. Red, White, and Brand is the company. I'll keep you posted. The website should be up here in by the first week of June. But if you're interested, we can help you today. All you have to do is send promo code Todd. Text that to 317-210-2830. We'll reach out to you. You'll get a 10% discount as a listener to this show, and we'll help you get what you need, your logo on almost anything with Red, White, and Brand. Again, text the word Todd to 317-210-2830 if there's something we can help you with. All right, so I'm getting to the end of this segment. What I want to do next segment is talk a little bit, or actually reference an article talking about this problem in South Africa. I want to talk about this. I want to go into this in a little bit more detail. The left doesn't want to talk about any of this. The left wants to say, basically, that there's no white genocide happening. And, listen, let's just talk about it. This, again, Trump is forcing this into the narrative, which is great. This is how you force the media to talk about things that they've been ignoring or not talking about for some time. So that's where I want to go. I have to take a break, though, before we get there. Quick time out, my friends. Back in just a minute. I wish everybody would say this with me. I know you can, but when I'm talking to people who just simply don't even want to hear the voice of people like me, but why can't everyone say white genocide is bad, black genocide is bad? I mean, pick any other group. Asian genocide bad. Whatever you put in there. Male genocide bad, female genocide bad. How about this? Genocide bad. How about that? How about can we not say that? You see, here's the underlying problem. The left has built a narrative, and the narrative is that we live in a patriarchal society, ruled not just by men, which of course is what patriarchy refers to, but by white men. And if you say that white men have been victims of genocide, then that turns that narrative on its head. And they can't acknowledge that because it undermines, again, you have to think how the left thinks, which is they're not going to admit anything that even gives the slightest bit of challenge to their narrative and worldview. And to us, it might say, well, look, okay, fine. You can still have your crazy concept of the patriarchy in America. Again, it doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. It's bat crap crazy, if you ask me. But okay, believe that. What does it have to do with South Africa? But see, that's not how they view it. They view it as if we acknowledge the slightest bit of this even being a remote possibility, then that's a tiny chink in the overall armor of our narrative here. Not only that, we're not going to agree with President Donald Trump. There's no way we're going to do that. If Donald Trump says it's sunny outside, we will tell our viewers how the sun is actually darkness. That's how they think of it. I am telling you, these people, they've lost the desire to try to fight in a world or to fight for logic. They've totally abandoned that. Their job is to, in their mind, is to drive you to hate the person in Trump or conservatives so much that even if they speak truth to you, you refuse to listen to it for whatever reason that they give you, because they're Satan incarnate or they're trying to manipulate you or everything else. And you stop judging the actual things that you hear based upon the logic and reason, and you judge them based upon who says them. And now this is talk about a really slippery slope. Now it's a slippery slope. Listen, and I understand that people have credibility, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be people that you look to. In fact, I like for you to trust what I'm telling you, right? I mean, I'm not on here deceiving you. Maybe I'm wrong every 4 or 5 years or what. Kidding. But the point here is that, credibility is fine, but credibility simply because you're a white guy or a black woman or whatever, this is crazy. Credibility should be based on someone's ability to build that with you as an individual over time. Simply saying they're more credible because they're part of a racial minority or some other group that's been victimized throughout history is just, this is nuts, folks, but this is where we are. Headline here. JustTheNews.com. Biden-era reports genocide expert confirm Trump's human rights fears for South African farmers. Trump's video evidence of hate directed at Afrikaners met with quibbles about what genocide means. So the Afrikaners are the white farmers who are being targeted in South Africa. So here we go. JustTheNews.com. The tit-for-tat battle the news media has waged against President Donald Trump over his administration's South African refugee policy is masking a harsh reality that the country's farmers do in fact face a crisis of violence. Even Biden-era government reports and Genocide Watch Group, that should be plural, groups, have raised flags, mostly being ignored until now. The only question is whether race or greed is the motive for crimes. This is where, to me, the concept of a hate crime. Some people want to say that that's a worse crime because you're targeting people indiscriminately. And I mean, maybe there's a part of me that understands that because that's more dangerous, I guess, to a population of people at large as a whole for no reason. And that's not a good thing. It's a terrible thing. But is it worse than hating someone because you knew them personally and you attacked them and assaulted them? And in some cases, people are murdered. In fact, people who are murdered, it's almost always the case they knew the person. So I don't understand some of the parsing of crimes. So the question is, as the article points out, whether they're being targeted because the people are simply greedy and want the land of these white farmers or because the farmers are white. I don't know. I guess for the technicality of for the definition of genocide, I suppose you've got to say it's tied to race. If it's tied to greed, I don't know. To me, we're at the same place. This is kind of parsing the wrong things here. We're dealing with evil. Evil needs to be addressed. Call it what you will, but the white farmers are being targeted, and Trump is saying, what is being done about this? Why isn't this being addressed? We have people, the article continues here, that feel they're being persecuted and they're coming to the United States. Trump said in the Oval Office meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Wednesday, people are fleeing South Africa, Trump says, for their own safety. Their land is being confiscated, and in many cases, they're being killed. The problems that President Trump identified, getting to the end of the segment here, this hour, the problem that President Trump identified in his meeting with the South African president, from rural violence that affects white South Africans, known as Afrikaners or Boers, to a legal regime promoting race-based property seizures, are certainly real. But debate rages about whether it rises to the level of genocide. And that's where I got to stop, my friends. See you on the other side of the top of the hour. SDG.